Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with the chess world's best players, promoters, and educators about their lives, careers, current projects, and best practices. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. I'm here with Grandmaster Sam Shankland, number 4 or 5 in the United States, depending on which day you check the FIDE ranking. I'm really thrilled to have him on. He's one of the most active and ascendant players we've had on this podcast. So, Sam, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So as we record this, I really appreciate your taking the time because I know you've got a couple things coming up. You just signed on to play a Pro Chess League match tomorrow, and then you're off to Gibraltar after that, if the internet is correct. Are those things true?
They are. I will be making my Pro Chess debut for San Francisco tomorrow, and I'm flying to Gibraltar on Saturday.
Okay, so we should note, by the way, this will come out in about a week. So when people hear this, they'll be able to tune in online to watch you in Gibraltar and to check the result of what happens in your Pro Chess League game. But what I wanted to ask you regarding that is how you decide which events to play in and which events not to play in.
Well, basically, I would consider myself a student of the game at this point. I don't really make enough money to justify exclusively playing professionally, so I do some teaching and writing and whatnot to help pay the bills. But I'm ambitious enough to hope that I can make 2,700 and beyond. So I basically only will play tournaments where I really think I'm getting better and getting good practice in against strong players. And the prize fund is almost never a concern to me.
So it's basically like tuition potentially to play in an event like Gibraltar? Yeah,
I mean, I would rather have things been a little bit cheaper, but, it's not that expensive anyway. And most of the tournaments I play, I get decent conditions. It's just I don't haggle much for an extra $100 here and there the way I know some people do, just because that's not what really matters to me.
Okay, and in terms of the conditions that they offer, so we're talking about like hotel rooms or appearance fees, or what sort of discussions do you have?
All sorts of stuff. Whether they cover your airfare, your hotel, whether you get a single room or a double room, things like that. These are just base negotiations that you have, and I have a pretty good sense of who offers what and who can pay what and so on. But it's relatively basic stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any sort of like guidebook? Like, does someone pull you aside and say, okay, this is what you should ask for once you reach X rating, or how do you figure it out?
Well, I definitely ask for more at higher ratings, and I'm more ambitious in what tournaments I ask to play in and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's very rare, for example, that I'll get invited to a tournament that I had never heard of or don't know anything about, and I know most tournaments roughly what they offer and, what I should expect.
Okay, and with Gibraltar coming up, I was curious, when you have a tournament like that, that's not a closed, so it's not a list of players that you're playing, but you do know who is in the open section. Does your preparation change as the event gets closer, or are you just studying chess generally as it leads in?
Well, I haven't played in a few months, which is a pretty long break for me. There was just no good tournaments between October and now, essentially. But I will probably ease up a little bit, not spend as much time training as before just to keep energy levels high. I'll probably do a little bit more opening work and a little bit less like tactics, just because I think my openings got a little bit sloppy while I was taking this, I guess, I want to say taking a break, but while I was inactive. So there's some stuff to work on, but I guess it's a lot more review. I sort of think of reviewing stuff you already know is not really going to help you become a better player, but it will help you perform to the best of your capability for the next event. And while for the most part I have a long-term plan of trying to become a better player, it's for the next event, your goal is to just score the best you can.
Okay, that's interesting to know. And speaking of the last few months, you've written about, and it's become out in the open, that you were part of Magnus Carlsen's team for the World Championship. So how did that opportunity come about?
I was working with Johan Ludvig Hammer, Norway's number 2, for quite a while. I mean, we started work, I guess, in like 2009 or 2010. And he was a natural choice for Magnus to include in the team. And at some point when I got good enough, Johan Ludvig recommended me to be chosen as well. And so then I helped him out for the 2014 match, and then, I'm a full-time player myself, so it's not like I have the time to just work exclusively for him, and so we didn't really have much contact then for a couple of years, but then Magnus was satisfied enough with my work that he had me back for 2016.
Nice. And do you think that there's a certain aspect of your game that he relies on, or just more general preparation?
General preparation. All of us at training camp are mainly looking at openings. I think he does play training games with people to try to prepare, but he's looking for people a bit stronger than me as sparring partners. But I basically just did what I was told. I tried to analyze what I was supposed to, and, I guess I'm doing something right because he hired me again.
Yeah. And were you together in one place with the rest of the team?
Not all of them. There were a few of us in Kragerø this time, which is a resort in Norway that we were hanging out in while we were preparing. Well,
I'm sure you were pretty pleased with the result since you were part of Magnus's team.
Yeah, he had a much tougher time in the match than I was expecting. And at some point it really looked like he was going to lose, but he managed to pull it out in the end.
And what was your overall impression of the match, just as a chess fan and compatriot of the players?
Well, I don't like the Berlin. I don't think anyone does, but, that's how chess is kind of going these days. Black is just doing well. It's pretty clear to me that chess is a draw. And when you're looking at a match with the two best players in the world who have, months and months and months of time to prepare their opening for it, it's, becomes pretty clear that that's the direction in which it's going. And so, but I think that Magnus messed up a bit when he sort of lost his head after he didn't win easily. He was pretty level for games 1 and 2, and then games 3 and 4, he really could have won either of those games, and he somehow drew both. And that's when I think he started to make poor decisions and get frustrated, when I think if he had just been patient and done more of the same. Karyakin was not going to hold those endgames forever.
And what's your opinion of the 12-game match? Do you think it's the right length these days?
Yeah, I have no objections. It's I guess if you had a longer match, people would feel comfortable taking more risks. But we've seen a very diverse set of 12-game matches. And if it's boring or something, or people aren't getting good games, I think it's largely just because of how the players are approaching it. For example, there were a lot of matches I thought were extremely tense and interesting and tactical. I think Topolov Kramnik and Topolov Anand were both great. But Carlsen and Anand, both of those matches were good, I think, as well. So, it was tough in a match like this one where there were so many draws, but I guess sometimes that's just the nature of the players you get.
Yeah, and you mentioned that chess, in its nature, is a draw. What's your opinion about the long-term future of chess and the way do you think the format needs to be changed?
I do. There's any number of things that could be done. If it were up to me, I would just like to have World Cup style tournaments all the time. I think that knockout tournaments are the best way to run basically any individual sport. The only individual sport I'm aware of that's really popular worldwide is tennis, and I can't think of a single tennis tournament that's not knockout. And so I don't like the idea of changing the way the pieces move or changing the starting position or anything like that. But if every single match has to produce a winner and a loser, and if you draw a game, you just have to play another one until someone wins, and the time controls get faster and faster, is fine as well. I think this would be a big help, just because no one would really care if there's a bunch of draws if ultimately the winner still remains. And also, I think people would be more willing to take risks and push very slightly better positions the way that Magnus does. Positions you'd never expect your opponent to lose, but you're if I'm grinding him down to exhaustion, nowadays, if you say I'm grinding him down to exhaustion, he'll be okay. For me, it's just his next opponent's going to be the happy one. Well, right. If you're grinding him down to exhaustion, then you play him again. It's, in general, I think that would be the best way to do it, but I don't think too much about this stuff because I'm a professional chess player. It's my job to train. It's not my job to try to redefine the game.
Makes sense. Yeah, you have limited energy, I'm sure, for politics and semantic questions.
Yeah.
So let's circle back a little bit. We have a fairly global audience, although a decent chunk of listeners from America. So I think some people are going to be pretty familiar with your backstory. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I did just want to touch the broad brushstrokes. So you grew up in the Bay Area and got a late start in chess. Is that accurate beginnings?
I played my first tournament a month before I turned 12.
Okay, so that's got to be pretty rare to reach your level.
Yeah, well, I really liked the game, and I think, I mean, who knows, maybe if I had started when I was 6, I would be challenging Magnus right now. It's also possible I would have just stopped enjoying the game and quit. You never know what would have happened, but I certainly think that I was able to learn faster as a 12-year-old than I could have as a 6-year-old, so I think I made up for lost time, or at least some of it.
And once you got playing, how much time did you devote to it in your teens? Were you involved in other extracurriculars, or were you just pretty much focused on chess?
Yeah, I was playing a lot of sports. To me, chess was basically just another sport. I guess I played it more just because, like, ICC existed, so you could just play chess online whenever you want. When it was, you know, if I wanted to play baseball or something, I'd have to get, like, my parents to drive me to the field and things like that. So just because it was more accessible, I was playing chess more. But I don't know. I'd say I was probably like playing an ICC for like an hour or maybe an hour and a half a day, and I was playing tournaments like once or twice a week. Okay,
and ICC is Internet Chess Club for the uninitiated. So did you play baseball?
I did. Baseball, I genuinely think I would not be the chess player I am today if I didn't take a fastball to the face when I was 13.
So that steered you away from baseball?
Well, I wouldn't say discouraged, but I became afraid of the ball, so I was the best contact hitter in the league. I didn't have that much power, but I was like never striking out, and then, you know, after that trip to the emergency room, I didn't play for like a month, and then when I got back, I'd be like standing on the very, very outside edge of the batter's box, watching a perfect strike right over the center of the plate, and arguing with the umpire, wasn't that inside? So pretty quickly I became a lousy baseball player just because I realized I was human. And also that was the same year that the Giants were up 3 runs in Game 6 of the World Series and then managed to lose. And Barry Bonds was my hero, and then it came out that he was using steroids. So I became pretty disenchanted with baseball pretty fast. And if that didn't happen, maybe I wouldn't be the chess player I am now.
I guess we have a former Little League pitcher somewhere in the Bay Area to thank for being entertained by your chess games and chess articles and videos.
Yeah, I don't think I thanked him at the time.
I'm sure you didn't. Any other sports besides baseball?
Yeah, baseball I sort of gave up. I was big into soccer for a long time. I still play recreationally whenever I can, and I played a season of lacrosse in high school.
Okay, wow, pretty busy.
Yeah, I like sports a lot.
And you mentioned you may have quit if you started earlier. I also know that you've mentioned quitting a couple times in interviews over the years. So I was curious if that's something you've really considered.
There was a time when I did. I was fed up with a lot of things. I was supposed to be a Grandmaster, and there was a lot of sort of yellow tape technical stuff that was preventing me, even though my performances were more than enough. And I overreacted to it. I'm an emotional person in general. I was 18. I didn't handle myself very well. I certainly wouldn't do that as a more mature adult now. But I needed 9 months basically to disappear. And I didn't play for a very long time. And I was just going to school and thinking that this is kind of it. But I had 3 tournaments that I had agreed to play prior to just sort of calling it quits. And that was the U.S. Junior, the U.S. Chess League, and the Berkeley International. And so I won the U.S. Junior, qualified for the U.S. Championship, and then I played board 1 for New England in the U.S. Chess League and led them to the best season of all time. And then in the Berkeley International, I finally made a last norm that would count. And so then I was like, okay, I mean, I've only agreed to play these 3. In theory, I could just never play again, but I was like, well, I qualified for U.S. Championship. It's good money. I might as well give it a try. And okay, I got 3rd. I won 20 grand. I qualified for the World Cup where I went on and beat Peter Lecco. So, you know, chess didn't want to let me quit.
And from there, have you had moments where you've thought about quitting, or was that just your one?
Seriously. Another thing was, it really took me, there's a lot of stuff about chess I don't like, but, spending enough time in college and like talking around normal people with normal jobs made me realize how much I really wouldn't want to do that.
So you mentioned the red tape. What else about chess don't you like?
The travel's pretty brutal. Like, you know, traveling 150 nights a year or whatever it is, it just feels like so much. It's hard to maintain friendships and relationships when you're traveling that much, and it's really tough when you get a streak of bad luck or when things aren't going well, because it's a game where there's serious backwards mobility, which is very necessary for a sport where it's a strict competition. But like, as opposed to, say, you know, someone working as, I don't know, a doctor or something, like, they're not going to become a worse doctor overnight or something like that. I mean, it's definitely tough in that regard, and it can be emotionally draining, but ultimately I love the game and I don't see myself doing anything else. So
in terms of emotionally draining, how much does a given tournament impact your mood? You mentioned Yoon Ludwig Hammer earlier. He's the predecessor, the previous guest, and he's mentioned he's going through a slump, and I was curious. I know that you haven't had a slump of that magnitude as recently, but I was curious.
Well, I had the worst slump of my life in 2016 or 2015, excuse me. And I never dropped more than like 30 points off my peak, but still that felt like an ocean of spot that I had been giving up. And I'm a very emotional guy in general. I certainly control it a lot better now. But then basically the way I handled it last time was I just tried to like enjoy my life more. This last year and so, you know, going into the beginning of 2016, I was down to like 26-30 something, and I wasn't even sure if I was qualifying for the U.S. Championship. But I just decided to make 2016 a really big year. And so it was. I became a homeowner, I got a car, lots of general. So I was just trying to become a happier person. And I also, you know, spent some time it was funny. I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I spent like a week or something just like hanging out like in McDonald's and places like that, just seeing the kind of minimum wage workers and like seeing how lucky I am that I get to jet around the world like and charge 10 times as much money as these like genuine hardworking people are making. And once you start becoming happier with what you have, I think it's easier to get over disappointments and then try to push harder for more.
Wow, that's really interesting. There's a photographer on Twitter who takes a lot of pictures of McDonald's all over the country. His name is Chris Arnade. So if you ever want to stroll down memory lane or get that same perspective without actually leaving your house, I would recommend checking out his work.
It wasn't just McDonald's. It was just like all sorts of like, you know, low wage work, you know, and I would go to these places and I would say, like, you know, these are like human beings here, you know. They may or may not have made poor decisions early in life. Maybe they're just down on their luck. I mean, you know, they're good people working hard. And, you know, I was just thinking how much I would hate to be like them and just how lucky I was to be doing what I was doing. And then, you know, the rating difference doesn't feel like as big a deal.
And in these down moments, if you think about other careers, do you think about anything in particular?
Well, I got a degree in economics, and I have a pretty good eye for the stock market, so I guess that would be something else I could do. I mean, I do some amateur trading, nothing too serious, but, you know, I make some money off that. So I think if I had to do something else, like, for example, if chess were solved tomorrow and the game just died, that'd probably be where I would look.
Oh, nice. I've spent many years trading myself. What sort of approach do you use?
I try to keep very objective about things in general and reasonably low risk. This election year was incredibly lucrative for me just because I was very aware of which stocks would go up and which stocks would go down when each presidential candidate was going up and down in the polls. And I pretty quickly realized I could count on them to say a whole bunch of stupid stuff. And so with the polls moving a lot and the stocks moving a lot, I was pretty sure I had a good sense of what would go up and what wouldn't. One example of one that I think was my best choice was I invested in Wells Fargo. I would basically thought to myself, they're kind of a disgraced company who had this big scandal. They dropped about 20% and stayed there, but it seemed like they were leveling out. So I thought that essentially they're, I guess you would call a hold. They're not like anything too special, but you don't expect them to just like go down money. But I sort of thought to myself, if Clinton wins the election, we're probably going to see no noticeable change. They're just going to continue their current trajectory. And if Trump wins and regulations get like dialed way back, then I think they're going to go up like crazy. And that's sort of exactly what happened. So, you'll notice that with all of these comments I've made, you still don't know which of the presidential candidates I like. But I was fully aware of which stocks would go up with which candidate. And so I just sort of played people. I also think people were very emotional during election years and make poor decisions. And that's to my financial benefit.
Yeah, I have some friends who have bet on elections over the years, and I think the market's getting mildly more efficient. But if you compare it to other endeavors, there's still a lot of mispricing going on.
Yeah.
So getting back to chess, you won the Sanford Fellowship. Were you still in college when you won that?
Yeah. So the Sanford Fellowship starts from July 1 one year to July 1 2 years from then. So when I won the Sanford, I had 1 year left of school, and then I would have 1 year of no school. And basically, I had crunched the numbers and whatnot, and found that I could effectively spend and use the money while combining it with 1 year of school, but I could not do it with 2 years of school. So that's why I only applied once I was already a junior in school. I did not apply in my freshman or sophomore years.
So it's a 2-year term, correct?
Yes.
So it ended last year?
It ended in 2015.
Okay, yeah. So have you had to make adjustments in your lifestyle once that ended?
Yeah, while I was on the Stanford, I was basically not teaching at all, just because I was trying to focus on playing. In hindsight, they think I probably should have taught a little bit more, but, now that once the Stanford was over, I had to worry a little bit more about money. In addition, my parents were paying for my education, so I was sort of under their nickel at the beginning of it anyway, so I was getting a lot of money and not having very high expenses. But then once college ended, it was time for me to be responsible for myself as an adult fully, and the Stanford disappeared. I definitely had to work a bit harder to stay above water. I mean, I definitely can do it, but it meant I needed to take on some more projects, teaching kids or like teaching camps or writing articles, things like that.
Did you say that they think that you should be doing more teaching?
No, I mean, I had to just to pay the bills. I mean, I certainly can. I mean, if I wanted to just fill my schedule with lessons every week and, make $200,000 a year, I probably could, but I'm not interested in that because I don't want to do it. I want to be working to become a better player. So I wouldn't say I teach the absolute minimum, but I try not to teach more than like 5 or 6 hours a week.
Okay. Well, I'm a big fan of your videos on chess.com, so I encourage you to keep making them.
Yeah, no, I haven't made some in a while, but I think they've got a large library of videos backed up they haven't published yet, so maybe once they've churned through all that, I'll start doing some more. Yeah,
the tournament reports, of course, are my favorite because you just don't get that kind of perspective from people who are actually competing in tournaments at that level very often. So, speaking of competing, I just wanted to talk about your career generally. Do you have any specific highlights when you reflect on what you've been able to accomplish so far?
Well, 2 Olympic gold medals is kind of good. So I got the gold medal on board 5 for the Tromsø Olympiad. I got 9 points out of 10. I played the best chess of my life and got really lucky at the same tournament, and that's a really fearsome combination. And then the other one this past September where the U.S. won the gold, I've played in 2 Olympiads and I've got 1 gold medal from each of them, so that's pretty good. I've won some tournaments. I mean, this past year, there were 2 tournaments in a row that I won with 2,800 performances in Edmonton and Beale, so that was pretty cool.
Okay. And what about when you were younger and still climbing the ranks? Does any moment stand out where you realized that you had a lot of potential?
When I shared first at the World Youth Under 18 in 2008.
Okay, so that's already pretty far down the line, right? I mean, I guess it depends what scale we're looking at, but you are probably close to Grandmaster strength by then, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Do you get nervous before tournaments and or games?
Yeah, I get nervous before games, but once I start playing, I'm totally tunnel zoned and it stops. So And in general, I only get nervous before playing against weaker players.
Interesting. And is Grishik the strongest player you've played?
No, I've played Aronian, I've played Caruana, I've played Ricardo, I've played Wesley. I mean, yeah.
Okay. That's really funny that you only get nervous for the weaker players.
Okay. I mean, what if you lose to Hikaru? It's no big deal. If I lose to a 2200, he's gonna be on the cover of every magazine. And you lose 9 rating points. I mean, it's just. And in general, my belief that chess is fundamentally a draw basically tells me that I'm not going to win if my opponent doesn't make mistakes. And if a really strong opponent doesn't make mistakes, that's one thing. And you play well, you make a draw, and nothing happens to your rating. But like, if a 2200 randomly plays a really good game, it's like, well, there goes your rating, and you couldn't do anything about it. So you're somewhat at their mercy.
And in terms of studying, you've mentioned you work with some coaches. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I have only one real coach right now, but I have some training partners, some people I do opening work with.
Okay, and you've also mentioned calculation exercises as a focus recently. What does that mean? Like, what would you actually do to improve your calculation?
Well, my coach will give me a bunch of positions that I'm supposed to solve, and I try to do like 1 or 2 mixed sheets a day with like 6 problems each, and it keeps you sharp. And I mean, in general, I think when you get rusty, the first thing that goes is going to be your calculation. At this point, I'm not sure how much better my calculation can get without getting better at the rest of chess as well, or just getting more practice over the board. But I think if I were to stop doing these problems or fire my coach, that I would quickly get worse. It's something you really have to maintain.
I've wondered about that with players at your level. Do you mind saying who your coach is?
Yeah, it's Jakob Ogard.
Okay, yeah, famous chess author.
Yeah, he's the man for calculation, and I've been very satisfied with the progress I've made while I've been working with him. We've been expanding a bit to other stuff too, just because I think calculations is going pretty well. But again, I'm totally certain that if I stopped doing calculation exercises, I would get worse very fast. And
do you do any work on like the mental approach to your game?
Not really. I did 3 sessions with a sports psychologist once, and the first 2 were worth their weight in gold, in my opinion. But I think that's basically all the knowledge I really needed, because unless you have like major psychological issues, I don't think you need more than just some basic knowledge.
So what did he or she help you with?
Basically, some things like that you should play every game like it's your last. If you're not taking any risks in and of itself is a risk. Things like this. That you want to play the game you want to play. You want to play to your own strengths more than playing against your opponent's weaknesses. Things like that. And
you've mentioned that time management is a strength of yours. Is that something you worked on away from the board, or do you feel like it comes naturally to you?
It probably comes naturally. I used to just play every game in like 15 minutes, even when I was like 2200. So a lot of people had some problems playing with too slow. I had problems playing too fast, and now that I've learned to actually think, I still manage to not get in time pressure. Do you have any advice to people who struggle with managing their time when they play chess? Yeah, so if you know what move you're going to make, you should just do it. Like, a lot of people they'll look at some sacrifice and they'll know in their heart they're going to do it, but they want to go over it over and over and over again to make sure they're not missing something. Like, no, if you know you're going to make this move, you should not spend more time on it. That sounds like some advice that I, for one, could use. So what do you have coming up after Gibraltar? I'll be playing in this round robin in California in Burlingame, which has gotten pretty strong. I'll be the top seed, but it's going to be over 2,600 average. Then I have a small round robin in St. Louis, which will be like 2,670 average or something. They're trying to do some of these. And then right after that, U.S. Championship. Okay, so it sounds like you're going to be pretty busy starting next week. Yeah, I have 4 tournaments in 3 months, so. And is it grueling to go through stretches like that? I manage. I'm pretty fit, so I don't have much issue with that. Oh yeah, you mentioned working out. So what do you do? Are you a runner or still play sports or what? I mean, I play sports when I can, but I can't really join any leagues. I travel so much, so I'm mainly playing pickup games. I am a runner. I really don't enjoy running, but it's kind of important, I think, just because there's no better aerobic exercise you can get, and it's the most time-efficient way of doing so. I managed to injure myself a fair amount, so, nowadays I'm doing exercise bike instead or elliptical, but I try to run at least like maybe 5 times a week, and then I do weights. Wow.
That's a pretty healthy regimen.
Yeah, and I eat healthy as well. I think I wish I had learned earlier the importance of a healthy diet, but when you're 18 and you can eat whatever you want without getting fat, it's easy to develop bad habits.
Well, you're still 25, right?
Yeah, but I'm definitely noticing there's things I could do both physically and mentally when I was 20 that I can't do now. You start aging a lot sooner than you want to admit.
Like what can't you do?
My memory's not as good. It's not as easy for me to run, things like that. I'll gain weight more easily if I eat poorly. None of these things are disasters in any stretch. They just require you to know that they exist and just deal with them appropriately.
Yeah, and the trend only goes one way, unfortunately, so it's good that you're on top of it.
Of course.
So you've mentioned 2,700 as a goal of yours. Do you have any goals that you're willing to share beyond that?
I take it one goal at a time, and 2,700 is my next goal. I guess ultimately the goal is world champion. Greatest player of all time or whatever. More likely than not, I'm not going to make it because, only one person ever will be the greatest player of all time. But I think if you set your goals high and you fail but you get pretty far, you'll be a happy guy. Like if my goal is to become the world number 1 and I peak at world number 3 and stay there for a while, like that's a very successful career.
It's good to hear. I like hearing someone just say, this is what I want. And, because I feel like some people might be afraid to say something like that as their goal, but
yeah, I think this goes back to what the sports psychologist was saying. Like, is there sort of a lot of people sabotage themselves and not put all of their effort into something because they can't bear with the concept of total failure. I really did absolutely everything I could and still came up short. They think this makes them less of an athlete or less of a human being. And it's often subconscious, but I wouldn't name any names, but I definitely know a couple players who I think have this issue or had this issue. But I certainly have no problem like saying, yeah, I'm throwing absolutely everything I have, and any shortcoming that I have at this point is no one's fault but my own.
And so what's your training regimen like on a day-to-day basis? Like how many hours are you studying, and how do you break up the activities and stuff like that?
So the first thing whenever I wake up in the morning is I just grab my laptop and I follow the games, because I live in California, which is like 9 hours behind Central Europe time. So that's a lot of the games are sort of going on right around when I wake up. So I see if there's any interesting opening ideas that have been played and stuff like that. And I try to follow along in critical positions and try to make difficult decisions. So today, I woke up and right before our interview, I was just looking over Tata Steel games.
Yeah, it's fun when tournaments like that are going on.
And then after that, I'll generally make myself some breakfast, smoothie or something, and start doing some opening work. I'll do calculation work in the afternoon, and then go to the gym, do some more opening work, and call it a night.
When you watch tournaments online, do you tend to watch the announcing or just follow the games on your own?
Just follow the games.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so I've covered most of the topics I want to topic. I did want to touch a little bit on, we've talked about sports. I know you mentioned you're also into cooking. What else do you do to relax?
I hang out with my friends. I don't have too many friends, but the ones I do have mean a lot to me. And, I have probably like a party at my place with like Blitz and Bughouse and like stupid games, like maybe once a month when I'm around. So that's always nice. And I try to, and I keep it up to date with the news in the world and stuff like that. So, I watch stupid TV sometimes too.
Which stupid TV? Let's hear it.
I like South Park.
Okay.
South Park, Family Guy, that kind of thing.
More like subversive TV.
Yeah, somewhat cynical, I suppose, but I think those shows are very funny.
Yeah, I'm with you. And do you spend much time like in San Francisco or Oakland, or you pretty much stay?
I'll go to San Francisco if I'm going to like meet a friend or give a lecture or something, but I'm not usually going to go just for no reason.
Okay. And what about when you travel to tournaments? Do you try to get out?
It depends on the tournament. Conti Monsisk or Wykonze, probably not, just because the weather is so brutal. But, in general, like, in a place like Biel, where it's, like, really sunny and it's during the middle of the summer, I walk around a fair amount. But, for the most part, I'm pretty focused while I'm playing.
And are you ever expanding your trips and going sightseeing, or do you have any plans of doing that?
Usually not. Sometimes if I'm playing like 2 tournaments with a week in between and it doesn't make sense to go home, I'll crash somewhere for a week, but I'm often tired from the first tournament and I've got to go be training for the second, so I don't have that much time to go around. In general, I mean, I'm not that interested in sightseeing in terms of like going to museums or like historical landmarks or stuff. I'm much more fascinated by just essentially pretending I live somewhere and seeing how locals do things. So, I'm certainly I think it's a much more eye-opening and rewarding experience to just like find a friend in a country and like live with them for a week or two and just tell them, look, pretend I'm not here. I'm just going to follow you along and do your thing.
Cool. Well, one last topic I just want to talk about a little bit is the role of computers in chess. You are pretty well known for having a lot of opening knowledge, and I'm just curious how much you use computers versus don't use computers when you're studying.
Well, any opening work done without computers will just be laughed at, so you must be using them pretty frequently. But I definitely think they're hurting the game in terms of creativity, but at this point they're around, and that's just something you have to make peace with. So, you basically every single correspondence chess game now at the highest levels is a draw. It's like, 95% draw rate, and they're all just running their computers for like a really long time on every position. So if you just follow correspondence chess, like you're just basically seeing high-level computer chess at very high depths, so, and you have to be following these games to prepare, so it's a little disheartening sometimes, but, I mean, computers are around. I'd prefer if they weren't, but, that's not something I have the power to change, so I just live with it.
And one last question to try to put you on the spot. You can include yourself or exclude if you wish, but amongst this young crop of great American chess players, Nakamura and So and Jeffrey Zhang and Caruana and yourself and Ray Robson, who do you think is likely to achieve the greatest heights?
I don't know. I think it's definitely, I don't want to play victim too much or anything, but it's definitely much harder to become a great American player than it is to become a great player in another country and then move here. I think Wesley has the most potential, but I'm fully aware that he and Fabiano did not have American chess upbringings, while Hikaru, myself, Zhang, and Robson did. I think Wesley will probably get the farthest, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's me.
So what's the hindrance with an American upbringing?
You have to go to school.
Well, you can drop out at some point.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know like all the laws behind it, but I'm pretty sure that like just not going to school is illegal. You can be like homeschooled or something, but I think the kind of upbringing that a lot of these chess players, a lot of like the really top players had, where like where they got sort of quote unquote homeschooled, but really just studied chess all day, which is very common in places like Russia and, where all the best players in Europe or Asia are from. But that's not really going to fly in America, either socially or legally. And it's just not really part of the culture. Like, I mean, it's no fault of my own that I was not introduced to chess until I was 11. I mean, my parents did a great job trying to introduce me to all sorts of stuff, and chess is what happened to stick. It's just, they didn't introduce me when I was a little kid. So, and the tournaments in America are not nearly as good as the tournaments in Europe. That's changing rapidly, but when I was growing up, that was definitely the case. And so I certainly think that Fabiano and Wesley had kind of a leg up in that regard.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that Greg Shahade wrote an article a year or two ago where he said something like 7 out of the top 15 amongst like the teenage top chess players were homeschooled at this point. So maybe that's part of the reason the U.S. is gaining ground.
Yeah, that's becoming more popular, and then St. Louis is doing a good job getting sponsorship and getting good tournaments here and stuff like that. So, we're definitely turning things around, but for the moment, it's pretty clear that, we won the Olympiad, but if we weren't, taking the best players from other countries to play for the U.S., it would be harder to do.
And what's your philosophical opinion about our taking players from other countries?
Obviously, I don't love it, but it's also obviously hard for me to be objective because I'm the one getting impacted. I'm the one who might eventually get cut from the team or losing out on the U.S. championship. So I'm fully aware that I'm not able to give an impartial opinion. The one thing I will say is, while I think the rules should be changed to make it tougher, as long as the rules are currently in place, I would never blame the players themselves for making the best decisions for their careers, because if there's no rule against something, you can't ask someone not to do it. So, I like Fabiano, I like Wesley. They're good people. I'm proud to call them my teammates. But, and I certainly don't hold any ill regard for them towards changing federations. Lots of others do as well. It's how it goes. But I do think the rules are way too relaxed. And if you compare them to other sports, it's definitely that's the case.
Well, I don't think I have any more questions. If people want to get in touch with you, if you would like them to, how would they do that?
There's a contact form on my website. That goes to my email. I just don't like giving out my email publicly. But if you use the contact form of my website, that will definitely get to me.
Okay. Well, Sam, I really appreciate your doing this. I think the listeners are really going to enjoy it. It's nice to get the perspective of someone who's really in the trenches right now, working every day to get better. I wish you luck in Gibraltar and your other events this year.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to Perpetual Chess. To hear more episodes, give feedback, or suggest guests, go to perpetualchesspod.com. If you like the show, please help me out by telling your friends and giving me a high rating on iTunes. I'll be back next week with another episode of the Perpetual Chess Podcast.